I'm John McKee, editor of Messianic Apologetics. Messianicapologetics.net. And I would like to welcome you to this episode of Messianic Insider, your theology and news roundup for June the 20th, 2025. Today is Friday, so we are going to have a slightly longer episode because we're not going to have anything for Saturday or Sunday, the coming weekend. And so I'd like to leave you with something which you can be thinking about in your different Bible studies and reflection times. Of course, we can all feel a great deal of the pressure right now, particularly with the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran. We don't know what is going to transpire in the coming days and the next week. Last week, we were having to sort through everything which was taking place. I know that many of us have some very deep concerns and anxieties. And for us as a family and a ministry right now, within the next week, we will be departing for the Messiah 2025 conference. There's a huge amount of pressure on us right now to get ready, to get packed up. This is by no means a vacation. It is a lot of work. It is a lot of effort. And so with that, we definitely appreciate your extra prayers for just the energy we need, the strength we need, because we're going to be interacting with a lot of Messianic people, and we're going to be having a lot of input from different voices, and we just need to be able to sort through what the Lord is doing as we think about the past year, the past 6 months, the next 6 months, the next year. All right, so let's get started on our theology roundup. If you have not, please do go to the Outreach Israel Bookstore, outreachisraelbookstore.com. And here we're going to be doing a teaching featured from a survey of the Holy Scriptures for the Practical Messianic. This is a combined workbook of our previous volumes, Survey of the Tanakh and Survey of the Apostolic Scriptures. In many ways, this resource functions as an introduction to the Bible textbook for Messianic people. Certainly goes into a lot of detail involving the composition of the books of the Bible, how everything fits theologically, and how we as Messianics need to appreciate the great tapestry of God's Word. By the request of a friend of mine, we are going to be reviewing the Epistle of 1 Peter. And I have written on 1 Peter in bits and pieces here and there in different publications. I have not written a commentary on 1 Peter. That's not something the Lord has prompted me to do, but I have said things about 1 Peter, and 1 Peter is something which I think is very important to a lot of Messianic people. Not only was the Apostle Peter widely considered to be the preeminent among the original 12, but a lot of non-Jewish believers approach the Epistle of 1 Peter and see Peter writing a letter to mixed groups of Jewish and non-Jewish people, considering them a part of the restored Messianic kingdom of Israel. But in recent days, there have been other people in the Messianic community who have questioned that premise. What do I take from the Epistle of 1 Peter? Well, that's why we're having this discussion today. So it will get a little technical here and there, but I think you will appreciate a lot of the points we will be reviewing. Okay. In a survey of the Holy Scriptures workbook, This is intended to be a personal or group study where people read through the Epistle of 1 Peter, keeping a journal log of people, places, key themes and events, and major scripture passages. So in some kind of a personal notebook, for example. Theological summary of 1 Peter. The approximate date, 64 to 67 CE. The time period immediately prior to the Jewish rebellion in Judea, possibly during the persecution by Emperor Nero. The author of the letter, the Apostle Peter, assisted by Silvanus. The location of the author, Rome. And the target audience and their location, Jewish and non-Jewish believers in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, Bithynia, which would be mainly in northwestern Asia Minor. All right, so we're going to go through some things about the Epistle of 1 Peter. Some of you are familiar with them, some of you maybe not so much. The author of the Epistle of 1 Peter identified himself as the Apostle Peter, 1 Peter 1:1. He further said, I exhort the elders among you, as your fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Messiah. 1 Peter 5:1, New American Standard, which has been taken in terms of the author being personally present during the time of Yeshua's trial and execution. From the contents of the letter and the personal character seen of Peter in the Gospels and Acts, it is widely regarded as bearing all the necessary signs of being genuinely patrine. Within the early body of Messiah, Peter was widely considered to be the most prominent of the original 12 disciples, whose influence on the assembly was second only to James the Just. Peter was the first to verbalize to Yeshua that he was the Messiah, and Yeshua in turn told Peter that he would give his disciples the authority to bind and loose, prohibit, and permit. Matthew 16, 17 through 19. In the lists of the 12 disciples in the apostolic scriptures, Peter's name always appeared first. Mark 3, 16 through 19, Matthew 10, 2 through 4, Luke 6, 14 through 16, Acts 1, 13. It was Peter who preached to the masses gathered at Shavuot or Pentecost in Acts chapter 2, when the Holy Spirit was poured out, and it was... Oh, lost the screen there. Okay, that should be back now. And it was Peter who went to the centurion Cornelius, the first non-Jewish person specifically recorded to have received the good news. Acts chapter 10. Peter had a special vocational calling from God to go with the good news to the circumcised, Galatians 2:7, or the Jewish people, and he was a dominant figure at the Jerusalem Council of Acts 15. Genuine patrine authorship of 1 Peter is accepted by conservative examiners, and it was recognized as such in Christian works from the first century. Polycarp definitely quoted from 1 Peter in the early 2nd century, in whom, though now ye see him not, ye believe, and believing rejoice with joy unspeakable and full of glory. 1 Peter 1:8, into which joy many desire to enter. Epistle of Polycarp to the Philippians 1:5. In the late 2nd century, Irenaeus bore direct testimony to patrine authorship of the letter. So here we have a series of quotes from Irenaeus. And Peter says in his epistle, whom not seeing ye love, in whom, though now ye see him not, ye have believed, ye shall rejoice with joy unspeakable. 1 Peter 1:8. Against heresies 4:9-2. All this is declared that we may know that we shall give account to God, not of deeds only, as slaves, but even of words and thoughts, as those who have truly received the power of liberty, in which condition a man is more severely tested, whether he will reverence and fear and love the Lord. And for this reason, Peter says that we have not liberty as a cloak of maliciousness, 1 Peter 2:16, but as the means of testing and evidencing faith. Against heresies 4:16-5. And this it is which has been said also by Peter, whom having not seen ye love, in whom now also not seeing ye believe, and believing ye shall rejoice with joy unspeakable. 1 Peter 1:8. For our face shall see the face of the Lord, and shall rejoice with joy unspeakable, that is to say, when it shall behold its own delight. Against heresies 5:7-2. The epistle of 1 Peter was quoted within 2nd century Christian writings, which attributed contents and authorship squarely to the Apostle Peter. The 4th century Christian historian Eusebius later detailed how, as to the writings of Peter, one of his epistles, called the First, is acknowledged as genuine. This was anciently used by the ancient fathers in their writings as an undoubted work of the apostle. Ecclesiastical History 3:3-1. While ancient witnesses attested to genuine patrine authorship of 1 Peter, many examiners today doubt it on various levels. In the view of Donald Guthrie, however, quote, the very great weight of patristic evidence in favor of patrine authorship and the absence of any dissident voices raises so strong a presupposition in favor of the correctness of the claims of the epistle to be Peter's own work that it is surprising that this has been questioned. New Testament introduction, unquote. There is some debate as to where Peter was when the letter of 1 Peter was composed. In 1 Peter 5:13, we see the author identifying his location as being Babylon. Is this to be regarded as Babylon in Mesopotamia, or is it a veiled reference to the city of Rome? Many consider this a reference to the latter. The traditional composition of 1 Peter, as summarized by Eusebius, was that Peter traveled to Rome with John Mark, called my son Mark, in this letter, 1 Peter 5:3. There, he orally communicated to Mark the material which Mark would incorporate into his gospel, and he would also compile the epistle of 1 Peter. Quote, Mark was the companion of Peter, and whose gospel we have, that he should leave them a monument in writing of the doctrine thus orally communicated. Peter made mention of Mark in the first epistle, which he is also said to have composed at the same city of Rome, and that he showed this fact by calling the city by an unusual figure of speech, Babylon. Ecclesiastical History 2:15-1 and 2. Various conservatives think that this letter had to have been written in the early 60s CE, placing 1 Peter in the range of 64 to 67 CE, presumably, when Emperor Nero was in power in Rome, while persecution is undeniably a theme seen in 1 Peter. D.A. Carson and Douglas J. Moo do not think that any specific Roman persecution of believers in history by a known emperor is intended, but rather, quote, what is implied is the hostility Christians were known to have faced from the general Roman population, unquote. They further observe how, quote, the readers of 1 Peter were probably being criticized, mocked, discriminated against, and perhaps even brought into court on trumped-up charges, unquote. Liberals today largely deny authentic patrine authorship of 1 Peter within the lifetime of the apostle. A commonly proposed date by liberals for the composition of 1 Peter is usually thought to be the late 1st century during the reign of Domitian. It is instead often proposed that some kind of Petrine school or group of admirers in Rome, possibly involving figures like Silvanus, Silas, and Mark, composed 1 Peter. In the view of the Anchor Bible Dictionary, at least, quote, 1 Peter represents the witness of the Apostle Peter, the personal networks of a brotherhood reaching from Jerusalem to Rome, and the rich tradition of the Roman Christian community. Speaking in the name of their martyred leader, this Petrine branch of the family of God in Babylon assured fellow members of the household dispersed throughout Asia Minor of the bonds of suffering, faith, and home which united them. Unquote. From the Anchor Bible Dictionary. The Epistle of 1 Peter, then, could actually preserve some distinct elements of Petrine teaching, but would not be an actual transcription of something authorized by the Apostle Peter. Another reason often issued against genuine Petrine authorship of 1 Peter is how Peter mainly had a mission to the Jewish people, and the letter apparently had too broad an audience to really substantiate a non-Jewish readership. But this assumes too much of a division between the main missionary audiences of Paul, the nations, and Peter, the Jews. It was not as though Paul never reached out to his own Jewish people, as he surely lamented over their wide-scale rejection of the Messiah. Romans 11, 13, and 14. Similarly, Peter was certainly not one who disregarded the nations, as authentic Petrine authorship of 1 Peter requires readers to recognize this apostle as having cared for the needs of all people. More to the point, if Paul had recently died and Peter needed to take over some of Paul's previous responsibilities among the nations, then this certainly allows for non-Jewish believers to be within the direct purview of Peter's influence and mentoring. Liberal examiners also tend to doubt Petrine authorship of 1 Peter because of the high Greek composition style which this letter demonstrates to have, as a formal epistle. The Apostle Peter, with a fisherman's background, is believed to have been largely uneducated and unsophisticated, Acts 4:13, which is hardly what the Epistle of 1 Peter demonstrates from its author. Yet, given the amount of time which transpired between Peter's calling by Yeshua to follow him and the strong likelihood of secretarial assistance, Petrine authorship cannot be ruled out at all. Quote, it is difficult to find arguments which rule out Petrine authorship completely, especially if the involvement of a co-worker or secretary in this letter composition is posited. Unquote, from the Erdman's Commentary of the Bible. Is it true that as a fisherman, Peter would have been unable to learn or communicate at all in Greek? While Acts 4:13 says that Peter was uneducated and untrained, New American Standard, this quote probably means only that Peter and John were not versed in rabbinic lore, unquote. From Ralph P. Martin, International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. Meaning that neither was ignorant in terms of basic reading and writing. As far as Peter's own Greek competence is concerned, quote, it must be remembered that in Peter's day, Galilee was probably bilingual. The Greek language would have been familiar to Peter from boyhood. His own brother's name, Andrew, is a Greek one, and being a fisherman and living on one of the great trade routes, would have made it necessary for him to speak it regularly. Unquote. New Bible Commentary Revised. Carson and Moo further describe, quote, recent research on languages in first century Israel has revealed that Greek was widely used. Peter probably grew up using Greek to converse with buyers of his fish, unquote, as a second language. When one couples this with 3 decades of ministry work by the Apostle Peter by the time of 1 Peter's composition, including some regular interaction with Greeks and Romans, Peter would have had to learn Greek in the Lord's service by his divine empowerment. None of this should ever detract, however, from Kepha or Kephas being a first century Jew with a high appreciation for the Tanakh scriptures. Even if Peter were not necessarily an expert Greek speaker or orator, this by no means excluded Peter authorizing the composition of this letter via the hand of an amanuensis. The letter itself says, "Through Silvanus I have written to you briefly." 1 Peter 5:12, New American Standard. If Peter could not write in excellent Greek, there is nothing wrong with Silvanus, Silas, serving as Peter's secretary in the composition of 1 Peter, as well as playing some role in specifying the letter's contents. Silvanus likely did the same with Paul, as is attested in 1 Thessalonians 1:1. Silvanus playing a large role in the composition of 1 Peter is intensified if Peter were at all confined or arrested, like Paul was when 2 Timothy was composed, which was likely transcribed at Paul's request by Luke. A few conservatives, though, have actually ascribed Silvanus or Silas as being the actual author of the Epistle of 1 Peter. While there are no ancient traditions which attest to this, such a view would by necessity probably place the composition of 1 Peter quite close to the time of the apostle's death. Silvanus being the author of 1 Peter, incorporating the teachings delivered to him by Peter himself, is to be preferred over a largely anonymous Petrine school, composing it a generation later than Peter at the end of the first century. Guthrie points more in the direction of Silvanus Silas being the co-author of 1 Peter, along with the apostle stating, quote, "The Silas-Silvanus hypothesis cannot therefore be ruled out and forms a reasonable alternative for those whose main objection to Petrine authorship is linguistic," unquote. Sadly, Messianics who might advocate that 1 Peter would have been written in Hebrew or Aramaic might tend to fall into the same liberal arguments against Peter writing it. A Hebrew or Aramaic origin simply does not align with the history, extant traditions, and the intended audience of the epistle in mainly northwestern Asia Minor. Linguistically speaking, quote, 1 Peter has been long recognized for the excellence of its Greek style, unquote. Erdman's Commentary of the Bible, as the author's, quote, command of Greek syntactical usages is not inconsiderable, unquote. Guthrie. The intended audience of the epistle of 1 Peter was identified early in its composition. To those who reside as aliens, scattered throughout Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia, who are chosen. 1 Peter 1:1, New American Standard. The fact that 1 Peter lacks any quantitative personal references from the writer to the readers indicates that it was to be read as a kind of circular epistle and was not a private letter. Was the audience of 1 Peter Jewish, non-Jewish, or a mix of both? Both conservative and liberal interpreters are agreed that the audience was mixed. While the Jewish believers who received 1 Peter would have probably had an easier time understanding the many intertextual quotations from and allusions to the Tanakh, Old Testament, a non-Jewish audience can by no means be excluded. The audience of 1 Peter is actually labeled to be the exiles of the dispersion. 1 Peter 1:1, Revised Standard Version, parapedemos diasporas. In the first century CE, this would have been understood by many in terms of diaspora Jews. This leads some to think that the primary audience of 1 Peter was just Jewish believers. Did Peter intend to include non-Jewish believers as well as part of the dispersion? The text of the letter forces any honest reader to draw non-Jews as being among those who would hear 1 Peter. For the time already past is sufficient for you to have carried out the desire of the Gentiles, having pursued a course of sensuality, lusts, drunkenness, carousing, drinking parties, and abominable idolatries. 1 Peter 4:3, New American Standard. Among the former lusts which were yours in your ignorance, 1 Peter 1:14, New American Standard, would have been pagan idolatry, which does not apply too well if the audience of 1 Peter was exclusively Jewish. Oh. Keep having that issue with the PDF reader. Okay. In terms of the identification with non-Jewish believers making up a part of those who reside as aliens, 1 Peter 1:1, New American Standard, Peter referenced numerous passages from the Tanakh connecting his readership with what the original vocational calling of ancient Israel composed: a people for God's own possession who are to testify to the world of his greatness. 1 Peter 2:9 through 10, quoting or alluding to Deuteronomy 7:6, 10:15, Exodus 19:6, Isaiah 61:6, 43:21, Deuteronomy 4:20, 14:12, and Hosea 2:23. Most notable of these references has to be Hosea 2:23 and its appeal to how I will say to those who were not my people, you are my people, and they will say, you are my God. New American Standard. The Apostle Peter definitely thought that non-Jewish believers were incorporated into the commonwealth of Israel, Ephesians 2:11 through 13, via their faith in Yeshua. Yet, while claims of supersessionism or replacement theology can be made of the many Christian theologians who point this out, the perspective of Carson and Moo is much more tempered. Quote, Peter's emphasis is entirely on the inclusion of these mainly Gentile believers in the historic people of God. Unquote. The epistle of 1 Peter is extremely rich for the array of contents it possesses in only 5 chapters. Quote, probably no document in the New Testament is so theological as 1 Peter, if theological, is taken in the strict sense of teaching about God. Unquote. Martin International Standard Bible Encyclopedia. 1 Peter included a significant amount of Tanakh intertextuality and allusions. The Anchor Bible Dictionary entry for 1 Peter details a rather extensive list of connections for any reader of the letter to consider. Quote, from the Greek Old Testament, Septuagint use was made of no less than 24 texts or combinations of texts. Linking the eschatological community with the history of God's covenant people, this material served to stress the social estrangement and oppression of God's people as resident aliens in diaspora. 1:1, 17 and 18, 2:11, 3:6, Genesis 23:4, also Genesis 12, 1 through 20, 20 verses 1 through 18, Isaiah 52:3, 5, 3, 10 through 12, Psalm 33 or 34, 4:14, Isaiah 11:2, 5, 8 to 9, 13, Jeremiah 50 verse 51, their election and holiness, 1, 15 and 16, Leviticus 19:2, 2, 5 and 9, Exodus 19:6, Isaiah 43:10, Hosea 1:6, 9, 2:1, 3, 25. The rejection, suffering, and exaltation of the Messiah servant, 2, 4 through 8, Isaiah 8:14, 28:16, Psalm 117 or 118:22, 2, 22 to 24, Isaiah 53:4, 6, 9, divine redemption of the righteous and oppressed, 1:13, Exodus 12:11, 1:17 to 19, also 1:2, Exodus 12 through 15, Isaiah 52:3, 5. Examples of Sarah, 3:5 to 6, and Noah, 3:20. Fear of God rather than man, 2:17, Proverbs 24:21, 3:6, Proverbs 3:25, 3:14 and 15, Isaiah 8:12 through 13. Moral conduct, 3:10 through 12, Psalm 33 or 34, 13 through 17, 4:8, Proverbs 10:12. The imminence of divine judgment, 2:10, Isaiah 10:3, 4:17, Ezekiel 9:6, 4:18, Proverbs 11:31, Septuagint, and God's nurture, 2:3, Psalm 33 or 34:9, and exaltation of the humble, 5:5, Proverbs 3:34, Septuagint, 5:7, Psalm 54 or 55:23, unquote. Anchor Bible Dictionary. So that is a huge amount for us to sort through. It really is. The main thrust of the audience of 1 Peter being aliens and strangers in diaspora, 1 Peter 1:1, widely concerned how they were in exile from the realm of God's heaven in a world of sinners. Historically, people regarded as aliens were subject to, quote, constant exposure to local fear and suspicion, ignorant slander, discrimination, and manipulation as the regular lot, unquote. Anchor Bible Dictionary. The believers who would hear Peter's admonitions to them were most responsible for not responding in kind to the ways of the world and for demonstrating good works. 1 Peter 2:12. Representative of their Messiah faith. There was an expected submission of the redeemed in Yeshua toward the government. 1 Peter 2:14 through 17. Of slaves toward their masters. 1 Peter 2:18 through 25. And wives toward their husbands. 1 Peter 3:1 through 7. Yet, regardless of the various specific conclusions drawn by today's interpreters about the original ancient setting of Peter's instructions, all should agree that, quote, these duties are transformed by the example of Christ, 2:21 through 25, and by the purpose of those duties, to testify to God's power and goodness, 3:1, unquote. From Carson and Moo. This requires the power of the Lord to change these institutions from within, which in the case of slaves toward masters would necessarily mean the eventual abolishment of slavery. Due to much of the widespread attention in New Testament studies often given to the teachings of Yeshua and or the theology of the Apostle Paul, a letter like 1 Peter has been too overlooked. More and more scholars, though, are beginning to reconsider the value of the Epistle of 1 Peter. Local pastors and laypersons more generally are those who have tended to value 1 Peter the most as a part of various sermons or their personal Bible reading and study. Different readers of 1 Peter have tended to be impacted by a multitude of themes witnessed in the text. One of the most overarching of such themes is the priesthood of all believers, 1 Peter 2:5, and the service which born-again men and women are to demonstrate incumbent of their salvation. Endurance through suffering and persecution, 1 Peter 3:13 and 14, 17, is also a major theme of 1 Peter. All followers of Yeshua are to live like him, having holy lives, 1 Peter 4:3 through 5. The Epistle of 1 Peter is by no means a text overlooked by today's Messianic community, as many of its verses have served to instruct Messianic believers in the ways of holiness. One area of some interest to all readers should be Peter's quotation of Hosea 2:23 in 1 Peter 2:9 and 10, as this Tanakh prophecy is applied to a mixed group of Jewish and non-Jewish believers. What are the implications of this? Peter's immediate concern was obviously for the spiritual character and proper lifestyle of his original audience. They had a special calling upon them, which was very serious for them to fulfill. And the same is true of any of us today. Yet, the personal salvation of all those who encounter 1 Peter was squarely placed within the expectations of Israel's national, corporate kingdom restoration. The most which any of us can conclude about this is that Peter applied a restoration of Israel prophecy in the process of being fulfilled to non-Jewish believers too, but obviously left many of the details of fulfillment to the Lord. Investigating the fuller ramifications of 1 Peter 2, 9 and 10, both missionally and eschatologically, will be very interesting to witness in the future years and decades of our steadily developing Messianic movement. Okay, so, and here in the entry for 1 Peter, in a survey of the Holy Scriptures workbook, there are a number of broad, reflective questions, and then reflection on the place of 1 Peter in the Holy Scriptures. And in your journal, you're directed to write a few paragraphs, 2 paragraphs, on what 1 Peter means to you. So, sorry about the screen going in and out, but I hope that this is a useful summary, and it will help many of you who have wondered about 1 Peter and have given you not only just a little more information in terms of 1 Peter as an epistle, some of its original setting and context, but also, look, there are plenty of people out there in the world of theology over the centuries who have not accepted some of the traditional authorship. And those are not issues we should be seen to shy away from. Those are definitely things we need to keep in mind. The Bible didn't just pop out of the sky. And while I am seen to, yes, affirm genuine patrine authorship of 1 Peter, I'm not going to hide from you that not everybody believes that. All right, so that concludes our theology roundup. Let's go into some of the news out there in the world, because just like last week, right now, we continue to monitor the Israel-Iran situation. It's definitely very concerning. A lot of people are on edge. They're anxious. Is this going to be resolved soon, or is it going to escalate and get worse? And I stress that the reason we do the news roundup after the theology roundup is because everything is time sensitive and everything can change. Now, all the links I'm going to be going through, you can access those yourself when this episode is archived later today at messianicapologetics.net. Okay, so let's make sure this switches over. Yes. Okay, our first story is from yesterday, June the 19th, the New York Post. Breaking. President Trump said Thursday he would make his final decision on whether to strike Iran in the next 2 weeks because he's still hoping for negotiations. Okay, so if we're going to see this be taken all the way to basically the next 2 weeks, so next Thursday, next Friday, we should be at the Messiah Conference, but we know that this could change. It says in the next 2 weeks. So yeah, it could be tomorrow. Probably not, but we will see. Okay, from open source intel yesterday, June the 19th, I know many of you have probably seen some of the reactions of those not on the far left, but on the far right, some of them being America First, some of their reactions to Israel, Jewish issues, not what you would want to see at all. Open source intel has a few observations. Some American voices claim America First means standing by while a radical Islamist terror regime openly chants death to America and builds a nuclear bomb. Let's be very clear, this is not a slogan for Iran's leadership. It is a governing doctrine. It has been since 1979. This regime has spent 4 decades building, funding, and arming terror proxies across the Middle East and Europe. It has killed over 1,000 American service members and wounded nearly 6,000 more. This is not theory. It is not distant history. This is some of what they've done, and then goes through a listing of all the different things. So obviously, and I think unlike the Iraq war back in 2003, the situation with Iran has been building since the Carter administration. So this is not something which is new by any means. Would we prefer Iran to lay down their nuclear aspirations and then the Islamic Republic to basically go into exile and see the crown prince, the Shah return, and see some kind of transition to democracy? Yes, but we need to keep this in mind in scope of the wider narrative. Okay, also, Breitbart yesterday, President Trump issued a message Thursday that Iran has within the next 2 weeks to negotiate with the United States. Okay, and how much of the president's words are maximum pressure? We wait and see. From open source intel defender, Russian President Vladimir Putin told reporters earlier today, this is from yesterday, June the 18th, while attending an economic conference in St. Petersburg, that he doesn't even want to discuss the possibility of the United States eliminating the supreme leader of Iran, Ali Khamenei. A reporter then asked about the recent strategic partnership signed between Iran and Russia, to which Putin responded that the agreement does not include a clause on defense cooperation. Open source intel yesterday afternoon, June the 19th, senior Iranian official Mohsen Rezaei, I hope I pronounced that properly. So far, we haven't used our capabilities on land, at sea, in the oil sector, or in the Strait of Hormuz. We also haven't activated our allies in other countries. Several allies have asked to join the war, but we've told them it's not necessary yet. And indeed, what is the biggest concern right now, aside from the ongoing bombing and the ongoing military conflict? The concern is Iran going to close off the Strait of Hormuz, the Persian Gulf, out into the sea, and with that, the supply of oil, petroleum from mainly Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states. And if that happens, will the price of oil skyrocket? That is what the concern is. Okay, from David M. Friedman. He is the former U.S. ambassador to Israel during the first Trump administration. And there are a number of people I know who have engaged with him on this post he made yesterday. I am woefully unqualified to opine on Christian theology, but I did understand that most Christians believe that the New Testament supplements the Old Testament with a new covenant, while retaining the prophecies, covenants, and principles of the Old Testament, which remain intact and reflective of God's will. Just by the way of the most basic example, the Ten Commandments are in the Old Testament. Now, I am hearing some Christians say that the New Testament replaces the Old Testament, which no longer has validity or applicability. Is that a mainstream view? Okay, and these questions are raised by, what do I do as former ambassador to Israel, as an American Jew? What do I do when I hear different Christians say that they are not commanded or directed or encouraged as believers in Jesus to support the Jewish people, support Israel? I thought the New Testament affirmed the Old Testament, right? Well, what he's going to find is that there is a greater diversity of views regarding the connection of the Tanakh and apostolic writings than he perhaps knew about before. And while there are many Christian people out there who believe that they are to support Israel, the Jewish people, Jesus was a Jew, Jesus wept over Jerusalem, Paul lamented over his people, we should be moved with grace, mercy, and compassion. There are others who believe that the church is a new Israel. There's no more expectation of a restoration of national Israel. They take symbols like Jerusalem and the Holy Land as just being metaphors of the ecclesia. He's going to see that there's a lot more diversity in Christian thought and opinion. And indeed, as we move forward, we're going to have to deal with more and more of the negative impact of replacement theology or supersessionism. I don't have an answer today. I do pray about, Lord, what are we supposed to do now? What can we do now? What should we wait on? But it's going to be an issue. All right, this is an interesting article that came across my feed yesterday from Charisma News. How many churches do you attend? Study reveals surprising answer. So what's interesting from this is that there are many people who, in a new study by the Hartford Institute for Religion Research, it was discovered that almost half of today's churchgoers go to more than one church. And I don't think we're talking about people who spend half of the year living in this location and another half of the year living in that location. It's, they shop around and they go to church for this need, or they go to that church for that need. Many Christians today are seeking out multiple church communities that meet different spiritual needs, whether it be for worship style, teaching emphasis, or ministry focus. And while many of us in the Messianic community might wonder about that, because usually in one's geographic area, there's only one Messianic congregation and it's small, and you've got all these people from different Jewish, non-Jewish, ethnic backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds lodged together, and we just have to get along with some of that plurality. Here, at least, you see people are shopping around, or they're not loyal to only one church or one faith community. I do know some people, though, who, they have kind of a hybrid Messianic experience. They'll be part of a Messianic congregation regularly or seasonally, but they'll also be involved in a church. Sometimes that's because of having younger children, teenagers, and they need to be around a wide group from their own age bracket, which the Messianic community may not have. And this is something everyone, at least here in America, has to deal with, has to sort through. From Visegrad 24, yesterday afternoon, June the 19th, today in the streets of Tehran, people chant the name of my father, says Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi. So, is there a movement in Iran right now which wants to see the return of the exiled Crown Prince, the restoration of the Shah? That's the alternative to the Islamic Republic. Also, yesterday afternoon, June the 19th, from Open Source Intel, in a video message, Prince Reza Pahlavi said sources inside Iran report the regime's command and coordination systems are collapsing rapidly. He added that global discussions on a post-Islamic Republic Iran have begun, signaling growing recognition that the regime has no future. So, yes, a post-Islamic Republic Iran would see a democratic Iran, probably with the Shah as some kind of a figurehead, but we wait and see. From the Times of Israel yesterday, June the 19th, U.S. Special Envoy to the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, and Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, I hope I pronounced that properly, have spoken by phone several times since Israel began its strikes on Iran last week. In a bid to find a diplomatic end to the crisis, 3 diplomats told Reuters. So the Trump administration hopefully is going to try to pull out some diplomatic solution to this, but we will wait and see what happens over the next few days. Okay, this is something which I know has got a lot of people very upset. Just the mere thought of it. From Jesse Waters yesterday, June the 19th. The war is escalating quickly, and Trump says everything is on the table, even tactical nukes. The Ayatollah is all alone, hiding in a bunker, but he won't go down without a fight. Iran could hold the world hostage with a nuclear weapon, and we can't let that happen. It all comes down to this. Okay, the mere suggestion that this may have to end with tactical nukes, that's got a lot of us concerned, and understandably so. But we also know that in a time like this, there's a lot of information circulating, a lot of opinions circulating, a lot of people saying this, claiming that. How accurate, how inaccurate is it? Okay, from Vivid, yesterday evening, June the 19th, Benjamin Netanyahu, President Trump will do what's best for America. I trust his judgment. He is a tremendous friend to the Jewish people and a great world leader. We will do what we must and are doing so. And that's in response to President Trump saying that Iran basically is going to have a decision made about it within 2 weeks. Okay. From Fox News, yesterday evening, June the 19th, exiled Crown Prince of Iran, His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi, advocates for a new future Iran, and weighs in on the possibility of the United States becoming actively involved in the Israel-Iran conflict during an interview with Martha McCallum. Okay, 4 more stories from Open Source Intel Defender. And this is yesterday evening, June the 19th. Israel hopes the United States will join in a joint operation to destroy Iran's Fordo nuclear facility within the next 48 to 72 hours, with the potential operation being underway as early as Friday. It's Friday now. Though if not, officials have stated Israel is also weighing going it alone in order to avoid losing the military advantage it has gained over Iran in the past week, according to 2 Israeli security sources who spoke with Iran International. Okay. How accurate? How inaccurate? Is this just talk? Is this just maximum pressure? It does mean we all have to pray. Pray for Israel, pray for the United States, pray for the IDF, pray for the U.S. military, pray for our allies, pray for the Iranians, pray that it does not come to a massive conflict, that this thing can be resolved. Okay, it kind of changed things up a little bit. From Breitbart, this is from yesterday. Artificial dyes and additives are being removed from America's food supply, Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said this week, celebrating the moves many food giants are making to make America healthy again. And so there were a number of groups. He shared a clip from Fox News showcasing upcoming changes announced by food giants, including General Mills, Kraft Heinz, McCormick, and fast food chains such as Steak and Shake and In-N-Out Burger. Yesterday, we talked about Sam's Club and their Members Mark lines. Yeah, you're going to see a lot more food products pull a lot of these dangerous chemicals, additives, dyes, etc. from them. Okay. 2 more. Okay, this is from yesterday afternoon, June the 19th, and this shows you how you hear one thing, you hear something else. This is from Jackie Heinrich at the White House. An article stated that Trump was not considering a tactical nuke, that it was not one of the options that was presented to him. I was just told by a top official here that none of that report is true, that none of the options are off of the table. So some people are saying no tactical nukes. Some people are saying possible tactical nukes. Whenever we just throw the word nuclear out there, we all get anxious and we all get upset. I mean, I woke up this morning. I mean, you can feel the tension in the air. You can just feel it right now. And from Open Source Intel, this is kind of a commentary. It's from this morning, June the 20th. They warned the region would burn if Soleimani was taken out. They swore Israel would pay when Ismail Haniyeh, if I pronounce that properly, was eliminated in the heart of Tehran. They vowed flames after Zahedi, thunder after every strike. They promised unbelievable vengeance if Nasrallah falls. They said elimination of Iranian Revolutionary Guard Chief Salami would mean the end of Israel. They said if Israel dared touch Iran, 1,000 missiles would fall in an hour. They said striking the nuclear program would bring Israel to its knees. Just this week, they swore a surprise that history would remember for centuries. Nothing too significant ever happened. So what happens when Israel takes out Khamenei? Okay, that is an op-ed piece, obviously. But definitely reasons for us to be paying attention. We're seeing history unfold. A huge amount has happened in the past week. If you are not a little anxious, obviously you're not paying attention then, because we should be paying attention. We, of course, will wait and see what the next few days brings, the next week. It was estimated that this conflict could take up to 2 weeks. Are we going to see the downfall of the Islamic regime in Iran? Are we going to see the Shah return, democracy prevail, or are we going to see a massive conflict that then involves other powers? We don't know. But what we do know is that as the people of God, we have access to the throne of grace. We have access to the infinite power of heaven. I know that I am appealing to the Lord for his supernatural strength, especially right now because we're getting ready to go to this Messiah 2025 conference. I am approaching a burnout level just with all the things that have to get ready before we leave. So you can certainly keep me in your prayers that I don't exhaust too much. But yeah, there are just all these things going on. You can feel it in the spirit. There's a huge amount of tension. And are we going to have a release from this, or is it just going to get even greater? So we'll see what the next few days brings. We'll see what we get to talk about on Monday. As always, on behalf of Outreach Israel Ministries and Messianic Apologetics, I would like to sincerely thank you for your ongoing prayers, encouragement, and donations toward all of our ministry efforts. You can give online at outreachisrael.net/support. We'll see you again Monday with another episode of Messianic Insider. Until then, may God bless you, Shabbat Shalom, and take care.